Hello, and thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Ron Vincent, and I'm the Executive Director of Global Supply Diversity and Sustainability at Bristol Myers Squibb. Joining me today are two wonderful panelists, Janice Bryant Howard and my colleague, Farron Melton. As founder and CEO of workforce management firm Act One Group, Janice Bryant Howard has grown her business to 19 countries and more than 2,800 employees, making it the largest woman minority-owned workforce management company in the United States. Janice and her team connect great companies with great talent. Her passion for education, mentorship, and self-empowerment initiatives have earned her many professional and philanthropic recognitions, and she's a sought-after speaker and media subject matter expert. Farron Melton is the SVP and Chief Procurement Officer for Bristol Myers Squibb. Her team, which I'm a member of, is responsible for managing the company's external spend of approximately $12 billion, from early research to distribution. She leads a diverse team of over 400 global colleagues and manages a large external partnerships. Farron has had a 25-year career in the procurement and business management operations, including key leadership positions with Fortune 100 companies. South by Southwest and Rondu, we thank you both for joining us today.
Hey, Rondu, thank you. Hi, Farron.
Hi, Janice. Hi, Ronju. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you guys for being here. So COVID-19 has laid bare the racial inequities that plague our society, and the disproportionate impact the pandemic is having on Black businesses is further evidence of the widespread systemic barriers that hold Black Americans back. According to an analysis from the Institute for Social Transformation at the University of California, Santa Cruz, the number of Black businesses in the U.S. dropped by 41% between February and April of last year. By comparison, the number of white-owned businesses decreased by 17%. Black-owned businesses tend to have fewer financial resources to stay afloat, whereas 5% of white-owned businesses were financially distressed. At the end of 2019, approximately 21% of Black-owned businesses were struggling economically, according to the Federal Reserve Survey. Given the new urgency around these issues, I am glad to be a part of this discussion, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with these two great individuals who are advocates for diversity and inclusion and empowering minority communities. So before we get into the questions, I want to talk to you guys about how both of you got into your line of work, what kind of drive put you in this position, and quite frankly, let's talk about why supporting supplier diversity and diverse individuals from a talent perspective is important to you personally. And we'll throw that one over to Janice to start.
Hey, Rondu, thanks so much. And this is an important discussion. I'm delighted to be here with Bristol Myers Squibb. You might say that DE&I was born into my DNA. Many of the folks who are attending South by Southwest right now have heard me speak about the fact that I'm one of 11 children born to one mom, one dad in the Deep South. When I was born, Rondu, do you know that I was designated as colored on my birth certificate? I attended segregated schools for the early part of my schooling, and I was one of the first to integrate schools in the Deep South. From that, I quickly learned what it means from a health perspective, from a financial and economic perspective, and from a social perspective, to be engaged in the process with transparency and candidly with the right as a citizen if you're born here in the United States. So later, as I joined the job search, I saw just how critical these elements were. And I have to say that having started my business, the opportunity to be able to work with companies as well as workers has given me a real deep appreciation of the work that you're seeking to solve through discussion today. But before I even conclude on why it's so much a part of my DNA, I have to really thank you as your guest, because Bristol Myers Squibb has to have a shout out for your embrace of the social and economic justice question. Not only are you welcoming many suppliers to your platform, but your own employees who suppliers work with example what your company does in terms of allowing us to be a part of a community, a part of an individual's health. And I just have to say that being a part of your supply chain, I've witnessed the agility and the commitment you have to this subject. I'm really happy to be here.
And thank you for that. And I think that just highlights why our relationship is so important, and having allies and advocates within a corporation can really lift businesses. And speaking of an ally, we'll turn that question over to Farron because she's one of the biggest allies I know for supplier diversity and diversity inclusion in general.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I can't tell you how honored I am to be here with both of you. I would say supporting and advocating for diverse and Black-owned businesses has really been a long-standing commitment of mine over my last 25 plus years as a procurement leader. And it's really an important focus of my work at Bristol Myers Squibb. Janice mentioned Bristol Myers Squibb. We're a healthcare company. Our mission is to discover, develop, and deliver innovative medicines to help patients prevail over serious diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, and others. And we all have people in our lives that have been touched with these serious diseases. I've always been a firm believer that the diversity of our supply base needs to reflect the diversity of the communities that we live and work and the people that we serve. If we believe in diversity and inclusion among our colleagues, then it goes the same for our supplier base because diversity is a strength. And as a leader, I've been very honored for the past 20 years or more to partner with organizations that help do just that, like the National Minority Supplier Development Council, like the Disability In, the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, and of course, amazing and passionate leaders like Janice. It's together we can make a difference in the way that we work and make lasting changes.
Thank you both, and thank you both for leading from the front. We certainly appreciate that. So, next question is starting off with Janice. As we all know, 2020 was a difficult and challenging year. Between the on-ground impact of COVID-19 on Black-owned businesses, as well as the racial justice movement that has been surging in response to police violence against us Black citizens, which has created even more challenges for all of us. As someone whose business is providing talent to large organizations, what are some of the unique impacts on Black talent that you've observed over the last year with these compounding challenges?
Oh, Rondu, job loss, no doubt. Black workers have experienced record job losses over this last year, and all the pain and hardship that comes with losing that paycheck impacts their communities even beyond their families. So they've been disproportionately and are most likely to be the essential workers as well, which has its own set of risks. Now, according to the Economic Policy Institute, Black workers make up about 1 in 9 workers overall in that workforce and are disproportionately represented also in employment in grocery, convenience, and drugstores to the point of about 14.2%. This is very recent data taken, and I can continue with other data, but at the end of it, it all tells us that this in itself may be helping to contribute to one of the second impacts, which isn't a pleasant one. But as Farron mentioned, Bristol Myers Squibb is escorting a lot of people through serious illnesses. Death is another impact to Black workers during this pandemic. And I have to tell you, you may be lucky enough to have a job as a Black emergency or frontline worker, but even luckier if you have a job that doesn't increase the chance that you're going to be in a deadly environment or come out of it with harm to your family that way. So the data as to why the pandemic is taking such a disproportionate toll on Black Americans is still coming together. But it looks like many of the contributing factors are nothing new. They reflect the persistent economic and health disparities that have existed in this country and others for generations. I'm talking about higher unemployment rates, lower wages, lower incomes collectively, and much less savings that they have to fall back on. And I'd also love to say that how executives approach this is going to be a big part of that solutioning because corporations can have their own set of dynamics about solving for this. But unless you have executives who are really speaking to this and acting to this in the way Farron described, then you've basically got a branding campaign. And I
Mhm.
recall over 20 years ago, Farron sitting me down through a process that she had engaged in, asking, how did this feel to you? Rondu, we're talking about a whole generation in front of the discussion that many companies are just having now. As a responsible corporate executive, she wanted to know, how did the process feel to me? Was there any inequity or gaps in the process that could have helped it be a better opportunity for me to have succeeded in it? That's what it's going to take.
I think when we talk about supply diversity, we really look at the economic impact, job creation and lifting communities, and I think that has also been illuminated over the last 12 months. The importance of having a progressive supplier diversity initiative or program. And speaking of that, I'll turn this part of the question over to Farron to address. If we look back at minority-owned businesses and the unique difficulties they're facing, what are some of the most promising immediate solutions that corporate procurement leaders like yourself can implement?
You know, it's a great point and it's a great question. We've had a long-standing commitment to diversity and inclusion. Yet, as you point out, the unrest of 2020 was a critical inflection point for companies like Bristol Myers Squibb to really look introspectively and discuss the emerging role of a corporation, as Janice just mentioned. How do we shift the dynamics of diversity, inclusion, and health equity? So last year, we announced 5 commitments that were based on clinical trial diversity, supplier diversity, healthcare equity, employee giving, and workforce representation. And from a supplier diversity standpoint, which is my role, we committed to increasing our spend with Black and diverse owned businesses to $1 billion by 2025. And that's almost a 50% increase from where we started this out early last year. We feel like that is the next step, really, in our commitment to diversity and inclusion. We at Bristol Myers Squibb have a passionate and diverse team, and we've achieved significant results and really some amazing programs. And I'm going to get to talk about one of those a little bit later. Yet we understand that those bold commitments to diversity and racial equality will only be accomplished through a sustained, and I'll say intentional, focused, cultural shift in the way that we do business. This work will allow us to make much greater strides in supporting racial equality across the board.
Well, one of the things that working for Bristol Myers Squibb has really taught me is that when you have the right leadership and you have the right mix of diverse suppliers, you can make magic happen. I mean, look where we are, Janice. 4 years into our business relationship and expanding and growing the initiative, which is key. So there's a renewed awareness in business of the need to lead with diversity and equity in mind. So Janice, what are some of the examples of how businesses have helped to create job and economic opportunities for people of color in our communities?
Well, Rondu, people have been very quick to want to respond by making huge commitments to hire underserved population without really giving greater thought to creating work environments that promote the unity, promote the growth. If the environment we place the worker in is not one that's going to appreciate where they're coming from, then there's going to be a very low bar for where they can get to in that organization. Geography is a big thing too, because when companies reside so far from Black and other diverse bedroom communities, then the ability to get to work in those instances where work at site is important becomes an issue. I'd also say that the economic issues around broadband happens as well. So, for many households, when only one or two people can be on at a time, or in many communities like the one I grew up in is now in North Carolina, you get very sketchy connectivity. All of these things impact how successful someone can be and give companies an eye in a very real way that may be lower than their lens has been adjusted previously in how they're going to incorporate true DE&I in their organization and win from it. I need to say one thing that has happened. that I've noticed alongside the great work that companies who intentionally seek the value of DE&I like BMS does, and that is women-owned businesses. Many of our women-owned businesses, those clients for Act One Group, have actually made calls to ask, can you be sure to help us to find workers from homes that are either in depressed communities, or in particular, some have said, we don't have Black employees. Can you help us? These are new companies coming to us, not companies we're seeking. And so I want to make sure that we keep the conversation inclusive of women in this as well, and other groups of workers and owners who Farron mentioned have NGOs supporting them that are really stepping up and creating some of the more innovative ideas that enterprise companies can learn from. And I know Farron knows what I'm talking about because she participates so often and so richly to some of those same organizations' efforts. We've aggregated a whole community of NGOs within the Act One group who are helping us to meet such needs at local levels. There are great global efforts and there are great national efforts, but when you can join with NGOs at the local level, or community colleges, you're able to be highly impactful, not just in educating the workforce you want or in hiring the workforce you want, but in enriching the community so you have sustainability and growth from the investment you make in that workforce.
Absolutely, and you mentioned, Farron is at the table having those conversations, right? One of the hardest working CPOs in the business, of diversity and equity and inclusion. So we'll flip this over to Farron now, and I have the same question for you with the procurement side. What are some of the lessons learned from your own career that are critical to the success of corporate supply diversity programs?
Well, Janice mentioned it. You simply must have engaged and passionate leaders, leaders that are willing to be bold, that are willing to act intentionally, to make decisions that support the development of Black and minority-owned businesses. I think of it very simply. As a leader, one of our most important roles is to develop talent and diverse talent. And it's no different with our supply base. We need to spend time, energy to support their development. It's just a win-win situation. And there are a number of ways and best practices to do that, include partnerships with financial institutions, mentoring programs, sponsorships. I wanted to also talk for a moment about the impact that COVID-19 had on our business and all of our suppliers' businesses. It hit all of us very hard in different ways. But as you mentioned earlier, especially hard hit were Black and diverse small businesses. So one of the first actions that we took was to quickly implement creative financing solutions for some of our small, most vulnerable, diverse suppliers, just to make sure that they were able to survive early on. So we immediately paid all the outstanding invoices and we changed all the ongoing payment terms. And we stayed close with them to help understand what their needs were. I was incredibly impressed with the heart and the agility of our company to pivot and support our suppliers like that. And like many, many companies, we were just desperate for personal protective equipment. One of our Black and women owned suppliers shared a story of how they were in jeopardy of actually going out of business when we placed a large PPE order with them. But with that order, they were able to secure inventory for us. And to do that, they needed to hire and staff within their community, to Janice's point. In turn, that enabled them to start to source PPE for other companies, and they became a preferred supplier to several other large corporations as a result. And that's what we call the power of the purchase order. That's just an example of how one purchase order placed at the right time supported the company's survival, helped to serve patients, and build economic empowerment of their communities.
Absolutely. I think that is leadership. That's the intentionality. That is purpose-driven work to make sure that we are at the call of our diverse suppliers. That also goes to the point of having a strong relationship to have those authentic and sometimes uncomfortable conversations with the suppliers, right? The suppliers own businesses, it's their baby, right? They're proud of those organizations, those businesses, but having that one-on-one dialogue to understand where they need, what they need, and how really helps save some businesses. And I'm happy that we were there to be able to pick up some of those pieces. So as we get to our final question, I'd like to hear from you both. Think about the future. What do you consider some of the emerging or long-term challenges that corporations must deal with in driving business and economic opportunities to Black and other diverse-owned businesses? And we'll start with Janice as well.
Thanks, Ranju. Farron knows well what internally enterprise-sized companies need to do. We both know that enterprise-sized companies don't own the full responsibility for how we look at the future because they are not the larger number of people hiring folks across the globe. Here are some things I've been thinking on that I think really are pertinent to this conversation right now. First of all, I think that the challenge of culture, that's culture isn't something that gets designed and talked about over in the creative section of a company. It's how that company actually lives and behaves. And I've seen many companies lean on their curated messaging for their branding when, in effect, their customers and employees are looking to their behaviors. We've been fortunate to partner with organizations that are going through this process and companies like BMS who are leading the way for others to follow their examples. It has to happen from the top down in an organization and then back down to the top if you are organized like the military, which so many organizations are. We have very few circular driven leadership organizations today. For me, it's been STEM. I care very much about STEM education for all workers, particularly women and other diverse cultures and groups. And I separate those two because sometimes we look at things ethnically differently than we do culturally, and we've not gotten there yet. But two and a half of thinking in one vein, but 2.5 years ago, I started an organization called All STEM. And we are working with those NGOs I talked with you about. And we're creating dynamic change that I think can be a pilot for other organizations looking to do that. But lastly, I think we just have to educate people in a way that allows them not to see you have to lose something to give something. Many organizations use pie charts, and that pie can get sliced and sliced and sliced. And we talk about what percentage of our business goes to this group and what goes to that group. Or we talk about what percentage of our hiring incorporates this group or that group. Stop slicing that one pie, bake some more pies. I think we just really got to get busy and bake more pies. The world is big enough, the world is encouraging enough, and at risk of sounding like a Pollyanna, I think enough people have had enough.
Thanks, Janice, for that answer and for being authentic and real. Farron, we're going to turn that question over to you.
Thanks. I fully agree. And I think from my perspective, I would like to talk about two things. The first is supplier development. We just simply must continue to develop Black and diverse owned businesses to do important work for companies like Bristol Myers Squibb. This could be facilitating suppliers partnerships so that smaller suppliers could serve larger companies. Another example is sponsoring Black businesses for executive development programs like the Tuck School of Business so that they can learn how to scale and how to grow. We know that when diverse suppliers grow, they're successful. And we also know when they grow, they hire overwhelmingly from within their communities. And we know that that's foundational to economic equality and sustainability. And it really is a win-win situation. We get to bring in innovative suppliers into Bristol Myers Squibb and enable those minority businesses to support economic empowerment and development within their own communities. The second point that I like to talk about is inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs and corporate executives. We have a really successful program that's been in place for the last several years that we've named Power to Impact. because as leaders, we have the power to impact our communities and to give back. And this was actually the brainchild of one of our procurement leaders and is now run out of our supplier diversity function. And Power to Impact connects diverse entrepreneurs, procurement, and business leaders with local community organizations. And through those local community organizations, we reach out to underserved youth in those communities to help them to hear from and to interact with their role models. People that look and act like them, but that have been very successful and own their own businesses or are corporate leaders. We want to show them what's possible for their lives. And we've done programs like this in several cities, including Detroit, Baltimore, Tampa, Los Angeles, and Chicago, all with tremendous success.
I thank you for that. And I think, from the Power to Impact standpoint, it has been a pleasure to initiate and engage with the communities around the country. And it's purpose work, it's intentional. And if you can see it, you can be it. And that is important and that is powerful. And guys, we've run out of time. Quite frankly, we can sit here all day and talk about this subject, particularly with these two engaging guests. So as we wrap up, I want to make sure that we leave with a couple of parting words quickly. Be intentional. Be authentic. Purpose work is meaningful work, impactful work. We have the opportunity to change communities by what we do, but more importantly, by the way of who we are as individuals. So let's look at the North Star, because supply diversity is not a social program. It's an economic tool to lift communities. So thank you again to our guests, South by Southwest. Thank you both, and I appreciate it, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rondu. Thanks, Theron.
Thanks, Janice. Thanks, Randu.
Thank you all.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.